governed by the poverty datum line. We understand that maybe the minimum taxation bracket, it needs to be raised so that the budget is fixed to other sources of income governed by the nation, that we are blessed with the vast resources, so the taxation is a burden to us. We want to speak as well, the budget, it needs to revitalize factories that are within our nations that are lying idle. The nation is suffering unemployment, so it will be noble for the budget to revitalize those factories that are lying idle. And then when they are revitalized, it will be prudent for the budget as well to acknowledge at least a quarter that is allocated to the young people, so that we keep issues of unemployment. Like what my colleague had highlighted earlier on issues to do with disaster reduction, we still understand that there are still bills that are still in place. So we are talking the budget needs to support issues of policy development. For instance, the disaster risk management bill, it needs as well to be allocated enough funds. And then such committees, when established, it needs to have sufficient funds that are inclusive of young people. So these are my submission that we are making, that the budget, it needs to take consideration of these things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, the group from here. That's your full presentation, isn't it? Maybe if you have something written, it would also be very helpful if you could submit, so that the honorable members can also, even after today, go over it, and those who do not attend as well. Honorable members, as I open the floor to you, maybe just to clarify one or two things or to understand, maybe I would like to ask from your presentation that you gave, you had a very good point to say there must be disaster funds for the youth. So, for example, you gave an example of what happened in Byron Sika. I believe also we had the situation in COVID times where there was a disaster and there were funds that were made available for the youth, but you are saying there must be a specific fund within the ministry toward that. Do you have maybe a suggestion as to say a percentage, this percent amount for as a recommendation for disaster funds, or are you saying there should be a sort of levy created for the disaster fund, or it's just a general, so that we can take all approaches with each ministry? It's my question. That's my first question. The second question, sorry, the aspect of taxation, where you mentioned taxation too high and so forth. Yes, fair enough. But my question is, do you have maybe suggestions in terms of tax breaks for the youth specifically, to say maybe certain licenses can be exempted for youth or something like that, if I got your point correctly? So those are just my two questions. I would ask honorable members 3 or 4 to bring forward their points or questions so that they can wholly answer or contribute.
Thank you. Mine is not necessarily a question, but I would want to implore that in case you do have written submissions, it would be key to go much in the statistics of what you were mentioning. You have highlighted many issues, particularly pertaining to the VTCs, to the funds, to the taxes. There are figures when you are dealing with the budget. And particularly when you're making a presentation that speaks to a budget, you should sound more to what you want, particularly with the figures. Ours is just a duty to share the demands and supports that young people have to the black box, which is Parliament. But in so doing, it would be more convincing if we were to convey such information from you as a critical component of society, as an organization, having figures to say this is particularly the amount, which I think is what the chairperson is also sharing, to say when you talk about tax, it's just a general assumption. Of course, you would know that much of the revenues are obtained from tax, and what is the tax relief package that you would expect young people to be given. When you talk about the disaster fund, how much do you expect to be set aside? Is there a particular percentage to deal with? So yes, I understand that this meeting is being held, but I would want to implore that in case there is going to be a written document, it will be very much more convincing for when people are going to be raising up to speak through and relay the genuine concerns that young people are facing, to do so from an informed perspective, to which statistics is a critical core. Thank you.
Any further contributions, honorable members? No questions? Okay, maybe the youth group, you take a note. Do you want to add one or two points before we go to the 9?
Thank you very much. I think we have taken note of the comments or update. We are to share a written document, but we'll update it in terms of statistics and specific figures that we are looking forward to have. And also in our submission, we're talking about lucrative retirement packages, because we realize that again, issues to do with low employment opportunities for young people is due to the market that is already saturated. So if we can then have lucrative retirement packages, maybe we can help the Indian community then considering that, so that we then have opportunities for young people. But again, we'll update our statistics and share a written document.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Allow me to cross over to the NIO group represented by Mr.
McDonald.
Mr. McDonald. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. So, allow me to read the submissions that we gathered from the young people across the 10 provinces. So we view the national budget making process as a process that sets the environment in terms of policy. It also sets the direction in terms of resource allocation. So our key asks to the committee and also to the national budget are based on that assumption. So I'll just get into the first issue. So the first issue that we have is the need for us to increase the allocation to the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, Development and Vocational Training. If we look at the budgets when they come through, cumulatively when you look at the percentage that is given to the Ministry of Youth, normally it's between 3 and 4%. Yet we are saying that this is the ministry that also works with about 60 or so percent of the Zimbabwean population in terms of actually trying to empower them and position them in such a way that they can contribute to economic development. So specifically here we are saying that this funding should not only focus on refurbishing vocational training centers nationwide, but it must also facilitate the establishment of dedicated business operation spaces. Empowered youth equipped with skills from these centers should be provided with entrepreneurial hubs. These hubs will enable them to apply their skills effectively, contributing to various economic sectors, enhancing value chains that are within the National Development Strategy NDS1, and adding value to existing products and services. Then the second issue that we have is we recommend the creation of youth-friendly financial lending instruments aimed at recapitalizing government financial institutions. These instruments should offer low interest rates and include tax holidays for newly registered youth-led startups under the Women, the Gender Equity, the SMEs, and War Veterans Quota. Additionally, we advocate for providing low-interest loans specifically to young entrepreneurs looking to establish assembly units, manufacturing plants, or engage in value addition. Loan repayment should also be flexible, allowing for repayments to commence at least a year after the business has been generating its returns. I'm sure we've seen from the incentive that was introduced by the finance minister in terms of trying to incentivize the private sector to employ young people. So possibly this could also be something within that line of thinking. Then the third submission is on support for youth with disabilities, where we are calling for the budget to establish a dedicated support scheme for youth with disabilities, including those who are visually impaired. A specific budget should be allocated to address their unique needs, along with the creation of consultation platforms that allow them to influence relevant national processes. Then the fourth one, it's we're urging it's the creation of a Zimbabwe Startup Act. So this will be a supportive framework, a supportive legislation framework to drive innovation. This will enable startups to operate with certainty and access the resources that they need. We understand that the Zimbabwe Youth Council and the Ministry of Youth are coming up, I think, with an employment strategy for youth. This could also speak to that. Then we are also looking at the National Budget Making Process, amending the current Companies and Other Business Entities Act to provide a more comprehensive policy and legal framework that offers the same benefits as the Startup Act. Additionally, we are proposing an amendment to the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency Act to include provisions that facilitate investments aimed at nurturing and growing startups in Zimbabwe. Then more broadly, in terms of the ministry, we are also looking at the need for the budget allocation that goes towards youth empowerment and vocational training to be increased, so that the government can have capacity to even do mobile vocational training units, because there's an issue of accessibility when it comes to these training centers. Then for the increase in this budget, to also look at comprehensive career guidance programs to help young people transition, whether from a tertiary college, from a university, to employment. Then specialized training programs aimed at combating drug and substance abuse. And I'm sure our colleagues from YET have spoken fully about that. Then the next one is, it pertains to sports and arts. To say that there is need for a more localized approach to ensure that young people have access to sporting and recreational facilities across all communities and not just urban areas. For instance, if we look at the budget for 2024, there were centers that were supposed to be built in some rural areas, but if you have to go to some of those, there hasn't been much progress in terms of trying to then build those centers for young people. Then the next one is on youth innovation hubs. Here we're saying that the budget should support the scaling up of innovation hubs at state universities. This was an initiative that was recently rolled out. We are seeing that there is a gap in terms of supporting young innovators from non-university backgrounds. Many talented youth lack the resources to commercialize their ideas. So here we're proposing that there is increased funding for community-based innovation hubs that cater to all young people, regardless of their educational background. And then also for the budget to stimulate partnership programs between universities, vocational training centers, and local businesses to foster collaboration and innovation. Then the next issue is around the Empower Bank capitalization, where we are saying that the capitalization of the Empower Bank is very important because it's one of the key vehicles that the government is using to support youth enterprises or associations that are involved in the economy or in social or in different social enterprises. But many young people, they face difficulties in accessing these funds. So here we're suggesting the streamlining of the application process to make it easier for young entrepreneurs to access funding, and also for the budget to support capacity building workshops that equip young people to appreciate the requirements of the Empower Bank. Then the next one is on health and social services. This also speaks to the issue that our colleagues were mentioning around drug and substance abuse, where we are saying that the budget should adhere to the Abuja Declaration, which calls for 15% of the national budget to be allocated to public health. We understand some of the challenges that young people have when it comes to issues of access to education. Then the next one is on free and affordable education, where we are saying that there must be increased allocation for education subsidies and scholarships to ensure that all young people have access to quality education, and there must be prioritization of funding for tertiary institutions to make higher education more accessible to those, especially those that come from low income backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your very comprehensive presentation. Before I allow honorable members to share comments or ask, maybe I just said 1 or 2 points. I've noted that with your presentation, it was touching on a lot of ministries outside of our own, that is the health ministry, higher and tertiary, primary and secondary. Very good points that touch on the youth and the sports ministry. Very good points, but a lot of those points also would be good if they were to go to those specific ministries. The first point that you raised, very critical, where you said the percentage given to the youth ministry should be more than 3 or 4% of the total budget. As you mentioned, with the health ministry, there's an Abuja Declaration, which is 15%, just as with the Declaration for education. Do you have a suggested percentage? Because those specifics help us, again, so that we know how to lobby and what to lobby for, towards what amount. Do you have a specific percent that you suggest that the total budget, at least so much percent should come to the youth? Then as well, in terms of mobile VTCs, very good idea again in terms of mobility of the mobile VTCs. Do you have specifics in terms of the budget to say, from your budget of VTCs, so much or such percentage should go towards mobile so that we reach the really remote areas? Those are my questions, maybe in that aspect. I'll open the floor to honorable members.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand you also mentioned the disability sector, and you didn't also mention what exactly do you want and what's the percentage from the ministry. And also you mentioned about the health sector. At least if you can mention what exactly the percentage you want to be channeled to the youth sector on the health side. Thank you.
Honorable members, any other comment or question to be raised? Okay, and before you answer, I believe there's an honorable member that got in a bit late. Maybe she can introduce herself. Honorable Sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Chakukura. I'm a Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chakukura. Yes, Mr. McDonald, you may, if you have any additions to the questions that we got.
All right, so thank you very much for the questions, and I take on board, I think, the comment that was made by Honorable Ngadzure concerning the need for figures, to say when you're looking at the budget, when you're looking at a process like this, figures are very important. So it might also mean that some of the submissions, we relook at the figures so that there is clarity in terms of what we are asking through the national budget. Then in terms of the percentage for the Ministry of Youth, we had the privilege, I think, last year to engage directly with the committee in terms of how the ministry was performing, vis-a-vis the targets by the president. And you'd find that most of those were not done on account of the low budget allocations. So our thinking is that the contribution that goes towards youth should be within the margins of 7 to 10%, because most of what is done under the ministry, it's infrastructure intensive. Look at the vocational training centers. It means the centers have to be adequately, structured, built, having training facilities that are modern, amongst other things. Then apart from that, there was also a question on mobile vocational training facilities. I think this is something that we can look to then say, based on how the allocations have been done to the ministry, maybe what allocation would come to these mobile VCTs. But the idea of this is to just ensure that we enhance access, and we try to also increase the numbers in terms of annually the kind of young people that we have that go through these VCTs. Then in terms of the disability sector, thank you very much, Honorable Member, for that contribution. We'll also look into that to then say, in terms of percentage and specifics, what are we asking from the ministry? And then in terms of the thinking around drug and substance abuse, I think, which is the health component that we are more interested in, we'll also try to reflect and say what percentage from the allocation that goes to the ministry should then also go towards supporting issues of drug and substance abuse, given that the ministry also has got the responsibility for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if there are any further contributions by honorable members. I think that is very clear. I assume also, Mr. McDonald, that Nina will also give us a written presentation that's updated.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any further, maybe, considerations that may want to be added from the YET group before we close this session? Yes, Honorable Tubai.
Sorry to take you back. I think also from the YET, we need also maybe to ask them to bring maybe a comparative from the, since they mentioned there was a disaster in Mali, we need to know how many youth were affected during that disaster. Maybe it might also help us so that we can see how best we can also visit those youth who were affected from that side.
Yeah, okay. It's a good suggestion. I think the YET group has taken note. So with that in mind and with that session, we want to appreciate you, the YET group, the NIO group, for coming and giving us submissions that we will then take up as the budget process goes forward. We will be with the ministry soon, and we will add these contributions that are vital. Please, it's very important that as soon as you can, give us the written submissions so that our members can really browse through them and take up suggestions as we carry on the budget formulation process. With that in note, we want to thank you. Have a good afternoon, and you